Hallie Jackson with a breaking news special report. Donald Trump on trial as testimony in the former president's criminal trial wraps for the day, taking us inside the lurid details of sex tape sales in Hollywood and what exactly Mr. Trump's former right-hand man, Michael Cohen, may have actually been thinking. Want to show you here, Mr. Trump just leaving court. Here he is, and as he was walking out, he seemed to back away from suggesting he'd testify in this trial. We're going to get to that in a second. But let's start with today's key witness, Keith Davidson. He's a guy we've talked about during these special reports before. He's the former lawyer for Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who negotiated six-figure payments for both of them over their allegations of affairs with Donald Trump, allegations he denies. And both sides wanted to paint two very different pictures of Michael Cohen through Davidson's testimony. Now, for prosecutors, they wanted to show him as a guy who'd do anything for Donald Trump, with Davidson talking about the lengths Cohen would go to slam Daniels, threatening to rain legal hell down on her, saying, "You don't know who you're effing with." The defense instead painting Cohen as somebody who was out to get Donald Trump, that he had this personal vendetta, as Mr. Trump's attorneys also slammed Davidson as somebody who tried to extort people over celebrity gossip. They brought up his past associations with celebrities like Hulk Hogan, Charlie Sheen, Lindsay Lohan, Manny Pacquiao, just to name a few. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to explain why that matters. We'll take you inside all the rooms cameras could not be in. So if you weren't glued to every note, every word coming out of court today, if you had other things to do, we didn't. We got you. And this report is all you need. With our team of reporters, legal analysts, political experts ready to break down everything you need to know. I want to start outside court in Manhattan with Rahema Ellis. And just in the last 20 minutes or so, Rahema, we heard from former President Trump walking out of court, talking about that partial gag order that he's under, but tying it to something else. Let me have folks listen.
Well, I'm not allowed to testify. I'm under a gag order, I guess, right? I can't even testify at all. No, we're going to be appealing the gag order. I'd love to answer that question. It's a very easy question, the easiest question so far. But I'm not allowed to testify.
Okay, Rahema, you see him kind of looking back at his attorney, Todd Blanche. He's the guy that was behind Mr. Trump there. But give us the reality check, because the gag order does not prevent him from testifying in court if he wants to, right?
Absolutely, Hallie. The former president seems to have his terms confused. A gag order refers to what he says outside of the courtroom in reference to saying, making some disparaging remarks about potential witnesses. What he says inside the courtroom, were he to become a witness who goes on the witness stand, it's not subject to a gag order. So the former president is absolutely wrong in the way that he categorized what the gag order is preventing him from doing outside of the courtroom versus what he is certainly permitted to do inside the courtroom when he gets on the witness stand. He says he wants to do it, but there are a lot of legal experts, some of who you have that you will talk to, who doubt that he will. Hallie?
So let's talk about this Davidson testimony, right? Because he's the person who continued to be on the stand now. Prosecutors are trying to weave together this narrative, tying these alleged hush money payments to what they've described as election interference. And they brought some receipts, including some never-before-heard recordings of phone calls, right?
Yeah, they did. And it's all about, as you point out, they're trying to put pieces of the puzzle together to create a picture that Donald Trump was involved and what this all was about. You can see a full screen here from Keith Davidson, and he says, after the election, and this is coming at 3 o'clock in the morning, what have we done? Dylan Howard, who was the editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer, texts back, "Oh, my God." And then from Davidson, our activities may have in some way assisted the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. Again, for those who may, and the defense may try to draw a line that they didn't know that Donald Trump was directly involved in all of this. At 3 o'clock in the morning, they're saying they believe that they know that he knew that what they were doing was trying to help him by keeping these stories about Stormy Daniels away from the public, and that deal was being signed just 2 weeks, just days before the election in 2016. Hallie?
Give us a sense of what's going on inside the courtroom here, Rahema, because, you know, we can't see in it. We're getting notes from our producers in there. But what's interesting is Donald Trump pushing back on something. There are long periods of time where his eyes appear to be closed. He says he's not falling asleep, that he just closes, I'm quoting him here, he closes what he describes as his beautiful blue eyes, sometimes just to listen intensely and take it all in. Today, regardless, he seemed way more engaged, right?
Yeah, he did, particularly during the hearing around the gag order. And his attorneys were discussing why they think it's so important for Donald Trump to be able to make comments about the people who are going to be coming and testifying again, and that he was waving his arms as if to say that he is being hogtied, or that his hands are tied, if you will, from being able to defend himself out in the court of public opinion. He was very engaged in this level of back and forth in the courtroom between the attorneys, the prosecuting attorney and the defense attorney, when they were making their arguments about why this gag order should be imposed, or his attorney saying why it should be lifted. Hallie?
Rahema Ellis live for us there in downtown Manhattan. Rahema, another busy day for you. Thank you. I want to bring in our legal experts now. Our resident defense attorney, Danny Savalos, along with Debbie Hines, former assistant attorney general in Maryland. Thank you both for being here. Danny, let me start with you. At the top of this special report, we talked about people not named Donald Trump or Michael Cohen or Keith Davidson. We talked about Hulk Hogan and Lindsay Lohan and Manny Pacquiao, the famous boxer. Why? How do these celebrity issues fit into this whole thing?
Well, the defense is going to try to argue that this is something that had been going on with lots of celebrities for a long time, irrespective and independent and unrelated to the election itself. But what's happening here, Hallie, is this. We're hearing a lot of testimony that is scandalous, interesting, compelling, seamy, kind of unbecoming. That is certainly interesting, but really at the core, someone like Davidson is there for really one purpose, and that's to iron down that there was a transaction that Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels money. All the other stuff about the seedy underbelly of celebrity payoffs is really just window dressing. This is what they need Davidson for. And as much as he may be portrayed as a slimy kind of guy, it really doesn't matter if the jury finds credible that there was this transaction where Cohen sent money to Stormy Daniels, because the remainder where they need to show that Trump was involved, they'll get that from another witness, probably not Davidson.
I want to explain to viewers what we're seeing now on the left side of our screen. Let me pull that back up, actually, if I can ask our control room to do that, because those are live pictures now coming into us from, like, the parlance of former White House reporters and OTR. In other words, a stop, an impromptu stop that the former president has made. This is at looks like a fire station in New York City. You see that shot there. We understand he is there. He just moved behind some people. If I'm looking, that looked like maybe Jason Miller walking out, too, who is obviously one of the former president's top campaign advisors now. You see the former president on the right walking out. He is greeting people there. This is an indication here, and we'll talk about this with Mark Murray in a second, of how the former president is looking to do some campaigning even while he has to be in that criminal trial in court. It is a collision of these two things, as the former president is trying to show that he can still get out there, still try to do some campaigning, even as he's facing these legal issues. And we heard a lot about those legal issues today, Debbie, as prosecutors have laid out through Davidson some of the storyline here, right?
Correct. And they've done a really good job. I mean, I think the best thing happened really at the end with the recording that, I don't know if you wanted to get there that fast, but with the recording
Please, yeah.
that was with Michael Cohen and talking to Donald Trump, to basically, in the words and the voices that you hear, to basically say that Trump knew that Mr. Cohen had to go to him and had to get approval for things, and he basically knew at least as to the McDougal payout.
There's also interesting here, because this interesting moment where Davidson wouldn't bite on one of the terms that the prosecution wants to use, the idea of quote unquote hush money, right? Talk me through that, because he says it's a consideration in a civil settlement, but saying it's not, it's not a relationship, quote unquote. Help us understand why that semantic matters.
Okay, so he was trying to stay strictly with what lawyers say. I mean, that's what I say when I have settlements. This is just a settlement. It's in it's consideration. It's a legal term. It's consideration. We're giving you money for your settlement. And he was trying to just stay strictly with that. He was not going to say it was hush money, which isn't a legal term. So even though he did all these sordid details and everything, he doesn't want to use the word hush money, and he wants to get so technical about whether it was an affair, whether it was a relationship. But he was just trying to strictly say, this is what it would say in the document, which is true. In a settlement document, it's going to say, in consideration of this, we're giving you this.
Like, you're not going to find the words hush money in that documentation, basically.
Correct. That's where he was going.
So, Danny, do you think the prosecution got what it needed to out of Keith Davidson?
Oh, definitely. They didn't need that much from him. And the fact that he may be part of a world that people are not accustomed to, that they may find kind of really kind of shady, isn't really that harmful to the prosecution. Number one, prosecutors routinely use as cooperating witnesses people with bad morality or credibility issues. So this is nothing new. And all they really need Davidson for is the bookend of this transaction, this payoff from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels. That's really it. And the defense can cross-examine him all they want about other things, about his memory, about how Donald Trump wasn't around, which is significant. But the prosecution's gotten out of him what they needed, which wasn't all that much.
Let me pivot to the gag order here with both of you, because there was obviously another hearing this morning on some other times when the prosecution alleges that the former president violated, again, what is a partial gag order on him related to some of the things in this case. And at one point, the judge kind of sounded a little fed up. I think this is what we're showing here. Saying nobody's forcing him to talk to the press. The judge is pointing out Donald Trump doesn't have to stop and talk to the cameras on the way in and out of court here. Explain this piece of it, Danny. Do you believe that the former president and his legal team are maybe pressing their luck here?
Well, wait, we need to divide those, because I believe, I don't know, but I believe that defense counsel is ready to pull his hair out at what his client is making him do. No defense lawyer in the middle of trial wants to stop preparing for witnesses and preparing exhibits to have gag order violation hearings in the morning and have to figure out which tweet came when this tweet came. It's a nightmare. It's hard enough to be on trial. You work almost around the clock. After trial ends, you go home and you work, or the office, and you work on the next day's testimony. So the last thing that Todd Blanche wants to do is be in a gag order violation hearing, but he's got to argue for his client. And I have to say, the argument, the political speech argument, it's not completely without merit, and it's bolstered by the fact that Michael Cohen is out there talking, and if Marshawn goes Trump's way, which I don't think he will, it will be because Michael Cohen's been out there talking too much.
Prosecutors are really pushing hard here, Debbie. They're saying that the former president has created an air of menace. They've called his comments corrosive, but they didn't want necessarily jail time for him. That is maybe an option on the table eventually. How far do you think Marshawn will go?
So while the prosecutor may not want jail time, this might be the time that the judge does something for once that the prosecutor doesn't want. And here's what I was thinking about that they could do, because the prosecution doesn't want to delay the trial in any way. So we don't want him in court and, and then taken off in shackles somewhere like most other people are. But here's what the judge could do. The trial is not in session 5 days a week. There's usually a day off.
That's right.
So the judge could technically put him, meaning Trump, in a lockup in Rikers Island for the day that they are not in court. And that will not delay the trial in any way.
Is that not a stick of dynamite, though?
This is a trial, and there is no other person in the U.S. or the world, for that matter, who is going to be tried in a courtroom in the United States that has gotten away with as much stuff as Donald Trump has.
So do you think the judge is treating him differently because he is the former president? That if this were any other defendant, he'd already be behind bars for violations?
The judge is treating him differently than any other defendant. And let me say this, too, than any other if it were a lawyer, because I've actually been in court where I have seen a lawyer press a judge's, too far, and they have ended up not in jail, but they've ended up, which is what I said, in the lockup for that particular day. So he's pressing it farther than any other person, period.
Debbie, that is super interesting. Thank you so much, Debbie. Great to see you here in Washington. Danny, thanks to have you. Back in New York, that is where the action is that you're seeing on the left side of your screen. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll see if the former president makes any news. So far, it's been obviously a photo opportunity for him as he is making his way, obviously now out of court, heading back to whatever his events are for the evening. Let me bring in now, as a bit of a reset here, Yasmin Vasugian, who's following all of this for us. Yasmin, you've spent time, down, obviously, in downtown Manhattan. You're there. There's somebody we haven't heard from yet, Stormy Daniels, but we are hearing from, obviously, her former lawyer in Keith Davidson. He's talking about getting her story out there, the efforts by Michael Cohen to try to get her to stop, like this letter in 2018 that was allegedly signed by Daniels in January, in which she denied the affair, right? She denied allegations of the affair. She then appeared on Jimmy Kimmel in November of that year with a different implication. Listen.
This letter was written and released without your approval. Do you know where it came from? Do you have any idea?
I do not know where.
You do not know where it came from.
I think people might forget now, some years later, how much the Stormy Daniels situation burst onto the scene in those years.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's take a time capsule, go all the way back, Hallie, if we can, to 2006. That is when it was alleged that Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump first met at the celebrity golf tournament back in 2006. Allegedly, they had a one-night stand in which Donald Trump subsequently denies. He promised to put her on Celebrity Apprentice, the show that he was hosting at the time on NBC. And he did subsequently not do that. That is also part of the defense, by the way, that, for instance, Stormy Daniels has this kind of axe to grind, right? Because he didn't follow through on his promises to her after they had this alleged one-night stand, which, once again, Donald Trump denies. In 2011, she was approached about this story. She did not come out with it. And then in 2018, right, to the matter that you were just talking about, this statement, this letter released by Stormy Daniels in which she writes, "I'm not denying this affair because I was paid hush money. I am denying this affair because it never happened." Let me read you the verbatim between Davidson and Steinglass, an attorney for the people, when it comes to what he believes that meant. Steinglass says, "How would you characterize the truthfulness of this statement?" Davidson says, "It's technically true. I don't think anyone had ever alleged there was a relationship between Stormy and Trump. A relationship is an ongoing interaction." Steinglass says, "It denies Stormy received hush money. Would you give the same denial as January 10th, 2018? So they're kind of parsing the difference, Hal, right, between a relationship and a quote-unquote one-night stand, because that is what Stormy Daniels has technically alleged. Now, let's not forget, and this is a really important factor in all of this timeline, Hallie, is that it was August in 2018 in which Michael Cohen pled guilty and alleged it was Donald Trump who directed him to make these hush money payments. And that is crucial in this entire timeline.
The other fascinating piece of this, from what we heard from Davidson today, back when David Pecker was on the stand last week, people remember the sort of former tabloid king, there was like all these details about the dirty sort of world and, you know, just the interesting world of the tabloids when they try to buy stories. Here, you're getting the other side of it, right? The people trying to get the payments for celebrities on some of this unsavory stuff. We talked about it with Danny, the Charlie Sheens of the world, et cetera. Did you get the sense from testimony today that that's out of the ordinary? It sounded kind of like Davidson was trying to say, this is just how the biz works.
It's kind of, I guess, how the biz works. Thankfully, I don't necessarily know because it's not the business that I'm in, nor are you.
It's true.
And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that. But it seems as if that is, in fact, how the business works. And part of the strategy here, it seems, from the defense was painting Davidson kind of as this shady character, right? The shady underbelly of celebrity culture in which he's kind of an ambulance chaser, per se, right? Kind of knocking away at his credibility as a witness. So even one juror could say, well, I don't necessarily believe this guy. Look at him. He's going after this story. He's going after that story. The problem with that is they're trying to redirect the jury in a different direction, right? Look over here. Look over here. The problem with that is not what this case is about, right? And the prosecution has led with the fact that we have a lot of witnesses that have some credibility issues, right? Michael Cohen is a convicted felon. Stormy Daniels is a former porn star, a former adult film star. Karen McDougal, a former Playboy playmate, right? Potential witnesses there. Keith Davidson, right? Sort of this ambulance chaser in celebrity culture going after some of these cases. It's not about that. It's about falsifying business records. And that is why it is so important for the prosecution here to present the receipts, right? The evidence, the emails, the text messages, for the jury to focus more on that versus the characteristics and the morality issues, possibly with some of their witnesses, Hallie.
Yasmin Vasugian live for us there in Manhattan. Yas, great to see you as always. Thank you, friend, for sticking around on what I know has been a long day for you. Appreciate it. Mark Murray is also joining us now for this special coverage of the Donald Trump trial. Okay, Mark, let me move this. Let's talk about what we just saw in that live shot. I don't know if we still have it, that split screen we were showing at the top of this, because Donald Trump made his way out of court and made a bit of a stop there at this firehouse in New York City, at this fire station. An indication that he wants to be seen still out and about. We saw him for the first time on the campaign trail yesterday since his criminal trial began. Talk to me about the optics here.
This is someone who always wants to control the optics, at least how he sees it. And of course, we've seen some other kind of movements that he's had in Manhattan to kind of get out of the courtroom, which, Hallie, remember, it's not being televised, to something that actually has his image where he can interact with some of his supporters, being able to actually seem like, hey, I'm vigorous, I'm up to all of this. And of course, allows him to actually, that becomes the image of the day, as opposed to all the courtroom drawings that you end up seeing and all of our great reporting on what happened in the courtroom. But that's the image.
I wonder, it's the image because it has to be the image because there's no cameras in court, right? There's the image of the day is probably the sketch artist from inside court. But Donald Trump understands the power of a camera and understands that there are not cameras on him when he's sitting at that table.
Just have this mental exercise that if there were cameras happening, if this was the O.J. Simpson trial of the 1990s again, we would, I think, be having a completely different conversation about the optics and all.
You're right. He's been talking a lot about something else that's less about the visual and more about the auditory, if you will, and that is that partial gag order that's on him. He's been online on a social media platform demanding that the judge remove the, in his words, unconstitutional gag order. We're going to show folks it is, again, constitutional. And then he was talking about, even outside of court, how he is gagged. He's suggesting it means he can't testimony. He can if he wants to. What he's also doing is sending out fundraising emails for him. Is that what this is about, using this partial gag order to try to raise some money?
I think a lot of it has to do with money. And do remember that he's behind President Joe Biden in the money race for president.
Does it work when he talks about this stuff? Does he get more campaign cash?
It has really worked when he has actually ended up saying, hey, I'm being persecuted. Remember, after every indictment, his fundraising did go up. And so I think they're trying to go back to that well as many times as possible. And so, Hallie, that is one thing. And so what we end up seeing from his social media feed, to me, is the message that he wants to get out. Like, I'm being persecuted. This is unfair. But, you know, what's really interesting, we saw him on the campaign trail yesterday, and here was someone who was actually getting a different message out.
But he was talking about other issues as well, not just the trial, but he's also talking about his election grievances, these election fraud lies that he's been pushing now for years. And he did this in one of the local papers out there. He did not commit to the election results in Wisconsin if he loses. I want to show this to folks because this is making a lot of headlines today. He says, if everything's honest, I'd gladly accept the results. If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country.
Again, absolutely newsworthy for us to cover. We ended up seeing President Biden in his campaign smack that down. But also, it's important to note, this is out of the Donald Trump playbook over the last 8 years. He said this every step of the way before the Iowa caucuses against Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, if you remember, Hallie. He said it in the final days of his race against Hillary Clinton in 2016. He said it constantly in 2019 and 2020 when he was gearing up for re-election. He's saying it again. And this is just a pattern that he has done because for Donald Trump can't ever end up losing. And it is also worth noting our colleagues on NBC Digital and our campaign embeds have this great story up about how this is really translated over to Donald Trump's own supporters, where when you ask them, hey, could Joe Biden end up winning legitimately? Donald Trump's supporters say, no way. Even though when we end up looking at all the data in this race, Hallie, this is a 50-50 race. I think any man could end up winning the election.
That's right.
But Donald Trump supporters don't think there's any chance of how Joe Biden can end up winning because they're hearing it from the principal himself.
It goes without saying, and I think it's worth reminding people yet again, though, no proven election fraud to the degree could have changed the election in 2020.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And again, you know, but this has just been a pattern of him, you know, regardless of what the polls say, regardless of the results, that, oh, if I don't win, this is going to end up being skewed or somehow corrupt. And it's not, Hallie.
It's absolutely something to be watching for and something to be talking about a lot. Mark Murray, thank you so much for joining us for the political impact of all of this. A lot to cover, more coverage right here on NBC News Now, because we have some other big headlines to catch you up on tonight. We'll have that when we pick up regular programming in just a minute. We are coming on the air tonight with police in riot gear from Portland to California to New York, moving in, arresting thousands in a massive push. Cops now naming names of the people arrested. Deadlines now ahead. We've got live team coverage in just a minute. Then we'll take you to Mexico and the huge search right now for the brothers who mysteriously vanished on a surf trip. Why police are looking to one woman for answers. Plus, new layoffs, and next, a new CEO. More on what's behind the dramatic rise and fall of that pandemic-era fitness hero, Peloton. Then, why these new pictures of Britney Spears are triggering a new round of concern about her health. We'll show them to you later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are starting about 90 minutes just past the deadline set at Rutgers for protesters to clear out. That was at 4 o'clock Eastern. It is now 5:26 Eastern as police are clearing some other campus encampments coast to coast. These dramatic scenes, you see them here, playing out in some instances on live TV. You hear the yelling there. You heard those flashbangs being set off by police in the background. That's on the campus of UCLA, all according to reporters on the ground there. More than 200 people have been arrested, with officers tearing down the tent city that demonstrators had built. The lawn by the main hall at UCLA now looks a lot different than it did just a couple of days ago. And in the last few minutes, we're learning that one state lawmaker now wants a federal civil rights investigation into how the school handled these protests. A bit further north, the Portland State University campus is now closed after the school called in police to clear out protesters who have been there since Monday.
Police! You're under arrest! If you resist, we will use force!
You see police there going into the school's library, and that shouting at the end was that they would use force if protesters resist. They've arrested 12 people so far, 4 of them students. I want to bring in Dana Griffin, who's at UCLA, Tom Winter in New York, Antonia Hilton at Columbia University. And Dana, very dramatic scenes for anybody who's been watching overnight into the morning. That police presence at UCLA overnight, it looks wildly different behind you than it did not even 10 hours ago, right?
Yeah, Hallie, this plaza that had hundreds of people camped out for nearly a week now only has a single person in it, the guy who is power washing the sidewalks. We saw crews coming in to dismantle the tents, to remove the garbage. We had heavy machinery out here actually picking up that trash and dumping it into these movable garbage bins. A much different scene here. But what happens next is the big question. Protesters have made it clear that they are not done. We know that a lot of them will be charged with misdemeanors, but others may be facing more serious charges. So what the campus will look like over the next several days, we'll have to wait and see. We know classes have been canceled today and tomorrow. Well, they've been moved online. So we haven't seen many students here today. But how the university plans to move forward is going to be a big question. I want to read part of a statement from the UCLA chancellor, who just put this out moments ago. He talks about how they are going to investigate the violent incidents of the past several days, especially Tuesday night's horrific attack of a mob of instigators. His words here. He goes on to say that this past week has been among the most painful periods our UCLA community has ever experienced. He says it has fractured our sense of togetherness and frayed our bonds of trust. And we've seen just such an overwhelming amount of emotion from people who were here protesting the war in Gaza, and even just other students who believe that they feel unsafe on this campus. Some 209 students have been arrested. We are still trying to work out how many of them actually are students here. Hallie?
There's also, back here where I am in Washington, Dana, a nexus to the White House, with the president making his first sort of longer form remarks on this movement we're seeing. Let me play a little bit of that.
We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
We are seeing some of those consequences now play out, though, at UCLA, with more than 200 people arrested, and some of those protesters could end up facing more serious charges, right?
Absolutely. For the most part, most of them will face misdemeanors, but others are facing charges of assault, battery, trespassing, and vandalism. We know that one officer was hurt during that raid last night. So there's going to be a very lengthy investigation into what all happened here. The university is vowing to investigate what happened here, and you could likely see some people possibly expelled or not be able to continue their education here because of what went down. But we've also heard from the school that they want to allow people their right to protest, and that they believe that that is something that, you know, they welcome that here on the campus. But for them, taking it too far was the violence and the graffiti and the damage that was also done to this campus. Hallie?
Dana Griffin live for us there in Westwood. Thank you. Tom Winter is joining us now on the other side of the country in New York at our 30 Rockefeller headquarters. Part of the issue here, right, is that we watched here live on this show during a news conference from Mayor Eric Adams, in which he suggested that, quote unquote, outside agitators were involved in what was happening at Columbia at the time. Since then, we haven't learned much more, right, about who specifically they're talking about, who specifically has been arrested, et cetera. Why not?
Two columns here, Hallie. One is as far as the outside individuals, and they're calling them agitators. I would call them influencers in a current day kind of speak. Basically, these individuals, and we wrote about one of them yesterday, showed up on the night that they took over a hall at Columbia, kind of directing students what to do. The NYPD put out a separate video on that. That there have been some other individuals who have appeared to, and we're still in the process of reporting this out, coach some of the students how to engage with police. Those individuals were not around when the NYPD entered campus and are not among those being arrested. There were some individuals, as NBC News was first to report several days ago, that had the NYPD quite concerned, and you're looking at some of them now. James Carlson, a.k.a. Cody Tarlow, that's just one of his aliases. This individual was arrested back in 2005 at the G8 protests in San Francisco, assault and battery with a deadly weapon on a police officer, numerous charges related to that. He's a person of interest in a hate crime arson investigation by the NYPD for the burning of a counter-protester's Israeli flag. Amelia Fuller, another person who's been arrested here. This is at the City College of New York, and she was fired from the New York Botanical Garden for comments she made involving October 7th. And then Jacob Gabriel and Rudy Martinez, both of these individuals have a significant history of protest arrests here in New York City. For Gabriel, he was involved in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade protest and an arrest associated with that. So these are some of the individuals the NYPD says that they've arrested as a result of this. This information coming from a senior law enforcement official. And so we expect a lot more information on the types of individuals that they say they arrested, Hallie, I would think probably by the time the clock strikes midnight.
Tom Winter, thank you very much. Let me bring in Antonia Hilton at Columbia University. And Antonia, I got to tell you, this is probably at least the 8th broadcast now that we've come on this show and talked about what's happening on these college campuses, these demonstrations, pro-Palestinian protesters. And it is sort of again and again, we've seen these scenes, these encampments now, colleges coast to coast. It has felt like it has built and built and built, hit a tipping point in maybe the last 48 hours as you saw police move in, as you saw these schools start to respond to some of what they've been seeing on their campuses. And now a bit of a divide in the way that schools are dealing with it. At Columbia, where you are, on the one hand, you've got professors calling for a vote of no confidence in the school's president. On the other hand, some other schools are getting to agreements with their university leadership. Tell us more about that and where you see this going as somebody who's been covering this really from the jump.
Absolutely, Hallie. I mean, there is this split here. I can tell you at Columbia, the mood right now is solemn. Students, faculty, staff, incredibly upset. And that's people actually on all sides of this. I just spent time with a Jewish student who said that many of his friends have already fled campus, that in a way the action that we saw happen on Tuesday night was too little too late for them. And then also with pro-Palestinian students, just an absolute disgust at what they saw happen at their campus and what they call their home. Take a listen to a conversation that I had with a Jewish student who's a member of the pro-Palestinian organizing groups.
The police came in, and they came in droves, in dozens. Students ran from them, screaming, seemingly out of fear. I saw my students be pushed, be shoved. I saw one of my fellow students shoved down a flight of stairs outside of Hinds Hall.
You saw that with your own eyes?
With my own eyes.
And they're feeling this and processing what they saw that night and comparing it to what we're seeing at places like Brown and Wake Forest and Northwestern and in Minnesota, where the schools have managed to come to these agreements, where at Brown, for example, the Board of Governors are going to at least take this to a vote, and students feel like that is a democratic way to address such a painful issue. And many people here on the ground feel like, how did we not get to that here at Columbia?
Antonia Hilton, again, near the campus of Columbia University tonight. We'll see what happens tomorrow, Antonia, and what that day brings us. Thank you for being there yet again. Let's take you overseas now, because Hamas now says it's sending a delegation of leaders to Egypt to push ahead in ceasefire talks between Israel and some other key world leaders. An Israeli official had told NBC News they believe Hamas would respond to this latest truce proposal that would include the release of at least 33 hostages in exchange for a 40-day ceasefire in Gaza. You see the terms there. And if Hamas agrees, boy, that would obviously be very significant. The last time we saw any kind of pause in fighting was about 5 months ago. But here's what's making things more complicated. Already in the Middle East, it is after midnight now, and no official response from Hamas at this point, meaning still a very big and a very real question mark on any kind of a deal. Let's bring in Matt Bradley for a gut check. Matt, what is it? Where do things stand?
Yeah, Hallie, I mean, you mentioned the timing. It was still looking unlikely even before that, because we heard from a Hamas leader in Beirut today that the group has a, quote, negative attitude toward the draft they've been presented. And the fact is, this has been at an impasse for the past several months. It's always been like this. And the Biden administration, even though they're billing this latest proposal, which the Israelis actually helped to draft, as a very generous offer toward Hamas, and said that the group and its demands remain the only obstacle in the way to peace. This is a two-phase plan, the one that the Israelis just came up with. The first would see 20 to 30 hostages released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, and what could be the longest period of calm yet in Gaza since the crisis began, up to 40 days. And all this is according to the Wall Street Journal. The first phase could then be extended kind of at an ad hoc basis, with periods of peace, exchange for hostages and Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. The second phase, and this could be big, could amount to a 6-week-long ceasefire during which more hostages and Palestinian prisoners would be released. And crucially, the sides could discuss extending the ceasefire even more. But this is hardly the first time we've been through this, Hallie, and the fundamental disagreement that has dogged every round of negotiations is still there. The Israelis keep offering temporary ceasefires, while Hamas has hewed to their one demand for a permanent ceasefire. And that has made it almost impossible. Both sides are not budging. But there is one really crucial difference here. I know this sounds like history repeating. This time around, these talks do look like the last best hope to stop Israel from invading Rafah, that city on the Gaza border, where Israel, right with Egypt in the southern part, where there's supposedly thought to be 1.5 million Palestinians who are thought to have taken refuge. Now, Israel has said week after week that they are determined to invade Rafah, even though the United States, the UN, and other countries throughout the world, they've warned that an invasion of Rafah could create a humanitarian catastrophe. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us there overseas with the latest on that. Much more to watch, Matt. Thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the number of deaths related to pregnancies now falling back down to pre-pandemic levels in this country. New CDC data shows fewer than 700 women died from what they call maternal causes last year. That number was something like 1,200 in 2021, the highest number in half a century. Experts blame COVID complications for that spike. Number 2, Google's laying off hundreds of people from its so-called core teams and moving some of those roles to India and Mexico. That core unit is responsible for helping to build some of the most important and high-profile products for Google and for protecting people's safety online. A Google VP says the changes are in service of their, what they call, broader goals. Number 3, check out this new picture that Prince William and Princess Kate are sharing. That is their daughter, Princess Charlotte, her 9th birthday. Kensington Palace says Kate took this photo in the garden of their home. Number 4, hey, guess what? You probably already know this if you've been on TikTok today, and you probably have, but your favorite music is coming back. TikTok and UMG, the Universal Music Group, announced they've reached a deal, which means you will hear sounds from Drake, from Ariana Grande, Billie Eilish, etc., you name it. This ends that months-long, pretty messy battle between those two companies over things like how much artists should be paid and new regulations on AI. Number 5, if you've ever wondered what a 75,000-year-old Neanderthal woman looks like, now you know, according to researchers. Her remains were found in 2018 in a cave in Iraq, and archaeologists spent years piecing together hundreds of bone fragments, these Cambridge researchers eventually creating this 3D replica of what she would have looked like. Coming up here on the show, floods in Texas knocking out power for tens of thousands of people. We're going to show you one town left unrecognizable. Plus, a fiery crash shutting down one of the busiest highways in America. We'll talk about the rush to reopen 95. Let's take you to that desperate search tonight for 2 Australian surfer brothers who went missing during a trip to Baja California. We're learning 3 people have now been arrested in connection with their disappearance. We're talking about Jake and Callum Robinson. Their family members say they haven't been able to get in touch with them since Saturday. Callum had regularly been posting updates online for the first couple days of the trip. Then all of a sudden, those updates stopped coming. One local news outlet reports one of the people arrested had a phone that belonged to either one of the brothers or their friend who was with them. This woman also allegedly had some sort of methamphetamine with her. We still don't know who she is or how she might be connected to these brothers. Miley Hogan from our partners at 7 News Australia is joining us now from Ensenada, Mexico. Miley, we're good to have you. This is glad to have you, I should say. Huge search for these two guys and for the friend they'd been traveling with. Bring us up to speed. Where do things stand?
Well, Hallie, this investigation has really taken a significant step forward, with authorities revealing that 3 Mexicans are now in custody. That woman, the 25-year-old, was arrested yesterday. She is the one that was found with her phone in a possession that is believed to belong to one of the 3 missing men. Overnight, authorities took those other 2 men into custody. Right now, they are questioning all 3 of them, hoping that they may provide some information as to the whereabouts of the 2 Australian brothers and their American friend. We know that this search is really focused on a remote coastal area south of Ensenada. Locals there tell us that it's an area that is popular with fishermen, but that you really have to know where you're going if you're heading out there to camp and surf. And it is believed that that is where these 3 men were camping. Now, they hadn't made contact with their families since Saturday. The mother of the Australian brothers issuing that desperate plea on Facebook to see if anyone had seen her sons. We know that she is now trying to get here to Mexico to search for her boys and hopefully bring them home. Hallie?
Miley Hogan, thank you very much for that reporting. More to watch on that front. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Northeast Bureau, officials say they recovered the body of a 5th missing person from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. The victim, identified as Miguel Angel Luna Gonzalez, a construction worker who died along with 5 others when that container ship lost power and struck one of the bridge's columns. One member of that construction crew is still missing. Out of our Western Bureau, a California school district fired its superintendent after she allegedly threatened students for not clapping loudly enough for her daughter at a softball team awards ceremony. The superintendent allegedly sent players on the team messages promising to take away their graduation privileges unless they apologized to her kid. The firing came after a pretty lengthy investigation into the superintendent's conduct. And out of our Southwest Bureau, remember the house from Up? It's now one of the newest listings on Airbnb. You can enter for the chance to stay in that house in New Mexico as part of the company's new Icon experience. They say it'll help bring pop culture moments to life. It's apparently going to float, I don't know. It's not going to be held up by the balloons, but by likely a crane. All right, there's your chance. To Connecticut now, where tonight we're just learning that some pretty serious damage is going to shut down parts of I-95 in that state for what officials are calling an extended period of time after a major crash earlier this morning. You see that? That's what it looked like. This fuel truck burst into flames after it collided with 2 other cars. Traffic ended up backed up for miles. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Today, a fiery crash shutting down both sides of I-95 through a part of Connecticut for hours.
Holy dude.
A tractor trailer, a fuel truck, and a car colliding early in the morning. That fuel truck, loaded with thousands of gallons of gas, burst into flames under an overpass. You can see firefighters there trying to put out the fire. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont saying no one was seriously hurt, adding the bridge above the highway is damaged.
I know what an incredible inconvenience this is for people, and all I can ask you to do is stay away from that area as best you can.
The incident backing up traffic for dozens of miles, leaving drivers frustrated and stuck.
Stop, start. Could we having to reroute?
I-95 is the main north-to-south highway that runs along the East Coast and is one of the most dangerous interstates in the country, with 278 deadly crashes in 2022. Hundreds of thousands of vehicles drive across stretches of that highway every day, including trucks. So when something goes wrong, the problems can snowball.
Oh, my God.
Case in point, last April, when a fuel tanker rolled over on a bridge in Groton, Connecticut, killing the driver, spilling fuel into the river below and shutting down I-95 for hours. Then, 2 months later, that massive bridge collapse in North Philly, a tractor trailer flipping on an off-ramp and catching fire, causing an overpass to collapse. The driver died, and the section of the highway was shut down for 12 days until a temporary fix was ready. This major artery, crucial to keeping the East Coast moving. Maggie Vespa, NBC News.
Our thanks to Maggie for that reporting. Still ahead, Peloton's trying to keep the wheels spinning after losing their CEO and laying off hundreds of people inside their potentially troubled turnaround. Next. Let's talk about that shakeup today at Peloton with its CEO stepping down ASAP and the company laying off about 15% of its staff. That's like 400 people. That is a massive blow to Peloton and a big turnaround for the company that used to be super pandemic popular. Remember that? It was like everywhere as folks were stuck at home, trying to like keep up their heart rate, keep up their fitness, etc. CNBC's Gabrielle Fonrouge is here to break it down for us. You know, if you look at Peloton's stock price, it is now down lower than it was before the pandemic. They couldn't seem to sustain the popularity at its peak. What happened?
So, Hallie, a lot of things have happened. You know, first of all, Peloton has tried a lot of things to turn things around. It's partnered with big brands like Lululemon, started offering a bike rental program, partnered with corporations like Hyatt Hotels and Hilton. But probably the most important thing that it did was a rebrand. You know, we all know that when Peloton started out, it was reserved for a certain type of person at a certain type of income level. And obviously that limits the number of people that you can make money off of and sell to your customers. So they started to rebrand and started to focus more on the app. They opened up a tiered pricing strategy for their app, which started with free, $12.99, $24. That allowed them to reach all sorts of people who may not have $6,000 to shell out for a treadmill. But the reason why things have went wrong is a confluence of events. It's a little bit of the macro and it's a little bit of the micro. On the macro sense, consumers right now are pulling back on spending from all consumer segments. People just don't have the money to shell out thousands of dollars for exercise equipment. And also there's a limited number of people who would buy exercise equipment for their homes. It's only reserved for a certain type of person. And then also on the micro level, their balance sheet. Peloton has a broken balance sheet. It has about $1.5 billion in debt. It hasn't turned a profit since December of 2020. And Wall Street can see the writing on the wall. If you can't turn things around, if you can't grow sales, if you can't generate cash, there's only so much time you can keep going like this. Hallie?
What if you already have a Peloton and you're paying that $40 or whatever a month fee to keep it?
I mean, that's a great question. If you have a Peloton, it's obviously still going to work. The company isn't going anywhere. And Peloton users right now, they should rest assured that this company isn't going anywhere, at least not yet. The restructuring that they announced today is expected to save the company $200 million and then by fiscal 2025. And so with those savings, the company doesn't need to return to growth in order to generate free cash flow, which is what they need to kind of keep the business alive. That's what executives said today. But it's unclear whether or not this company can continue to be public. When you have Wall Street watching you like this, when you have these demands that you need to meet every single quarter, these expectations, you know, it's unclear. You know, it might make sense for a private equity firm or some other type of firm like that to buy the company out, kind of shield it from the public, be able to generate it some cash flow, but it's not going to be able to do that until it fixes its balance sheet.
Gabrielle Fonrouge, thank you very much. Super interesting. Appreciate it. Still to come, we are hearing from Britney Spears for the first time since some new photos created new concern over how she's doing. We'll tell you what she's saying about a late-night visit from medics. Tonight, some new concerns about how Britney Spears is doing after this dramatic scene outside that iconic Chateau Marmont Hotel in Hollywood. Spears herself, in just the last 30 minutes, putting out a new statement saying medics showed up at her hotel room door, she says illegally. The LA Fire Department says they responded right after midnight California time overnight to reports of an adult woman who was hurt. They didn't say what happened or how. But photographers caught this moment, the one that you see right here, showing Spears standing outside the hotel, wrapped in just a blanket, holding a pillow, at least that's what it looks like, with a lot of fans raising concerns about this scene because it's giving them a little bit of deja vu, with some suggesting it's echoing some of what we saw back in 2007 when it was reported that Spears had been struggling with her mental health. Reps for Spears did not return our request for comment, but obviously, Chloe Malash joining us now. Obviously, Chloe, we have that Insta post from Britney, right? Talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, Hallie, this is what we know. Two sources close to Britney Spears telling us that there was an incident at the Chateau Marmont last night involving Britney Spears and her on and off again boyfriend, Paul Solis, that one of her feet was injured, that paramedics arrived onto the scene and that Britney declined treatment, that she actually went home with her security team without Celise, and that she's safe. And, you know, just a little bit ago, we did see that Britney has posted a lengthy message to social media, and it's concerning. In it, she says that all it was is that it's much ado about nothing, that she twisted her ankle, and that paramedics arrived to her door, assuming her hotel room door, without her consent. That she uses the word illegal, Hallie, that they illegally showed up, and that she felt harassed. NBC News has reached out to the Los Angeles Fire Department, who has confirmed that they were called to the Chateau Marmont in the early morning hours of today, but they did not say that it was Britney Spears, you know, because they really can't usually. And they are declining to comment on Britney's version of what happened.
This goes beyond just like, you know, sort of celebrity photo du jour, if you will, or picture, because of so much of what Spears went through and the way that she became at the center of this firestorm over her mental health, over her competency. She wrote a book about her experience with the conservatorship that she had previously been under here. I mean, there's so much backstory here.
There's so much to unpack. And obviously, you know, these images of Britney Spears from the early 2000s of her shaving her head or her with the umbrella, you know, there's been so much coverage of that. These documentaries that have come out, and Britney in her own book talking about going through postpartum depression, going through her divorce with Kevin Federline, this tough situation that she was in where she wasn't with her children. And she's been very open about this very sad breakdown. And this 13-year conservatorship that she was released from just 2.5 years ago came under a lot of public scrutiny. So many of her fans are saying, let her live her life. If she wants to walk around barefoot and, you know, spend her money and do these things, it's her life to do so, and that she has free will, and it's every right for her to be able to do that. Obviously, there are those close to her that are concerned and want her to be okay. So there are many layers, Hallie, to this issue. And obviously, this is a very concerning incident.
Chloe Malas, thank you very much for your reporting. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. I will see you on Sunday on NBC Nightly News, wherever you watch your local NBC station. And, of course, right back here Monday on NBC News Now. More coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with police in riot gear from Portland to California to New York, moving in, arresting thousands in a huge push. Cops now naming names of those arrested. We've got the deadlines just ahead with our live team coverage in a minute. Then breaking in just the last hour, Donald Trump now saying he may not actually testify in his criminal trial. We'll talk about this possible backtrack and why Lindsay Lohan and Charlie Sheen were part of today's testimony too, at least by name. Plus, why Google is coming to its own defense in a first-of-its-kind monopoly trial that could have a big implication on the whole tech industry. Then we'll take you to Mexico with the huge search right now for the brothers who mysteriously vanished on a surfing trip, why police are looking to one woman for answers. And the explosive crash on one of the most important highways in this country. The question now, when will drivers be able to get back on track? We've got that later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are starting this show just about 2 hours past the deadline Rutgers had set for protesters to clear out. That's the latest, with police clearing other campus encampments coast to coast. You're seeing these dramatic scenes playing out. In some instances, they played out on live TV. Watch. You hear the screaming there. Before that, you heard the flashbangs going off, according to reporters on the ground, being set off by police on UCLA's campus. At least 200 people have been arrested there as officers ripped down the tent city that was built by demonstrators. Look at the lawn by the main hall now. You see the before, you see the after. Definitely looks different, and we're going to show you in just a second. It looks even more different now. In the last couple of minutes, we've learned one California lawmaker now wants a federal civil rights investigation into how UCLA handled these protests. Further north at Portland State University, campus is shut down after police were called in to clear out the demonstrators who'd been there since Monday.
Police! You're under arrest! If you resist, we will use force!
You heard the yelling at the end there. If you resist, we will use force. That's police, obviously, in the school's library. 12 people have been arrested so far, 4 of them students. Dana Griffin is at UCLA. Tom Winter in New York. Antonia Hilton is also in New York at Columbia University. Maura Barrett is joining us as well. So, Dana, in just the last hour or so, we heard those calls from one lawmaker about a potential federal investigation. Talk us through that and what it looks like behind you. I'm struck by the scene, or I should say the lack thereof, Dana. Not 10 hours ago, that was packed with demonstrators, with police. It was dark. It was sort of wild here. Very different now.
So different. And when you look at it, it almost, it doesn't look like the scene that we saw playing out pre-dawn, where you saw officers move in, arresting people, breaking down what was plywood, barriers, and several tents. Right now, the plaza is now empty. You've got just one person who's out there pressure washing the sidewalk, a much different view. Now, getting back to that request for a federal civil rights investigation that was launched by a local lawmaker who is asking for this investigation into alleged instances of freedom of speech being impacted by this protest, including claims that one guy was not allowed, a Jewish student wasn't allowed on campus because he identified himself as a Zionist. And this lawmaker is also asking for the UC regents to also initiate their own investigation. We've heard from UCLA, the chancellor put out a statement saying that they are investigating, so that will likely be part of this. But again, as you mentioned, a much different scene. Where this campus goes in the next day or two, still a lot of questions we are hoping to get answered. We are told the school will be making a press conference sometime today. Hallie.
Dana Griffin, thank you very much. Let me bring in Antonia Hilton, who is live for us at Columbia University. Also a different scene there, Antonia. You know, and I just want to say this here, because I think for some folks, it's a little bit of deja vu, because night after night we've come on the air, and night after night we've shown these scenes of these encampments, of these protesters, of clashes between demonstrators and police. Does it feel different to you now, and what happens from here?
Well, Hallie, it certainly feels different here now. There is calmness. There are a lot of students who are fleeing campus at the moment, and that is both Jewish pro-Israel students and pro-Palestinian students, all of whom have felt fed up in their own different ways in the last several days. The one thing that seems to unite them is a disappointment in the administration. For students who have been harassed, who have experienced anti-Semitic incidents, there's this feeling that the administration should have done so much more for them months before it got to this point. And then for pro-Palestinian students, there's this feeling that the administration hasn't respected their free speech, and that the police response that we saw Tuesday night, literally right behind me here, that it was disproportionate. I had a conversation today with two Jewish students here on Columbia's campus, one who is pro-Israel and the other who has been part of pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Take a listen to some of these conversations.
I don't really have faith in the faculty administration. I'm definitely nervous. It definitely does seem like our university is trending in a very dangerous direction.
I do empathize with my Jewish community on campus who do feel unsafe, but I think it's important to recognize that there's a difference between safety and comfort.
The other thing that both groups seem to agree on when I talk to students is that there's a possibility in the coming days, as we get closer and closer to May 15th, that is when commencement is supposed to happen as planned, that there will be protests all over again. With the police presence expected to be here at Columbia through May 17th, it's unlikely that we'll see encampments or people re-enter a hall like Hamilton here. But they seem to believe that there's likely going to be some kind of disruption just because of how upset people seem to be with the way things have unfolded here. I mean, look at some other universities, for example. You think of Brown, Northwestern, Wake Forest. These are schools that managed to come to agreements and get their encampments shut down in a pretty quiet and tame way. Many people that I've been speaking to here question why that wasn't possible here at Columbia, Hallie.
Antonia Hilton live for us there at Columbia. And, of course, the mayor, the NYPD commissioner are saying that both Columbia and City College, they say nearly 50% of those protests included unaffiliated parties. Antonia, thanks. Maura Barrett is in Wisconsin for us at the Madison campus there. And the school says talks with student organizers are still happening now. They are not calling police, at least not at this moment, right?
They've advised, Hallie, that they're not going to be calling police until at least tomorrow. We've learned that the university officials and campus leaders, protest organizers here had a meeting this morning, discussed the violence that they saw yesterday, student leaders tell us, and the chancellor promised that police would not move in until they had another meeting. That meeting would be set in the next 24 hours as of this morning. And so we haven't gotten details on when the next meeting will be specifically in terms of tomorrow, but they've reassured them that police will not come again, because remember, this is a very different scene than what we saw on Wednesday morning. It was 7 a.m. The students were just waking up here at this encampment when police moved in with riot shields, and there was a conflict, a clash between protesters and police. 34 people ended up being arrested, 4 officers were injured, and so the university says that the dialogue is ongoing. All of this unfolding because of the encampment specifically. The university is saying that they're not against the students' rights to free speech. They want them to be able to exercise that, but there's a state law that says that the encampments are not allowed. The university has the authority to say, hey, it's actually fine for them to do this, but the university has not done that. So in terms of why the tents are back up behind me, I spoke with some of the protesters today about why it was so important for them after almost everything was cleared out yesterday, why the tents went back up today and what message they were trying to send the university. I want you to hear some of my conversation with Abby Klein.
The message is that we're going to be here indefinitely until they meet our demands, until they just close and divest.
And so I just spoke with a few students who were arrested yesterday. They walked me through the experience of being brought across the street and held in a community theater here on campus until they were released. They were just cited. They were not charged. And I asked them about, do you feel reassured that they say they're not going to come in again, the police? And they said, you know, we are appreciative that they have said that they've, you know, put this promise out there, but we're not so sure that we can trust that. And there is some reassurance. They say that maybe we won't be woken up in such a jarring way that they were Wednesday morning, but there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how the university will respond and how productive these talks will be going forward. Hallie?
NBC News. Maura Barrett live for us there in Madison. Maura, thank you so much. I want to take you back now to New York because you have other developing news for us tonight. And that is, of course, the criminal trial of former President Donald Trump, with the newest testimony there taking us inside some of these lurid details of sex tape sales in Hollywood. And what exactly Michael Cohen was actually thinking. He, of course, is the former right-hand man of the former president. He didn't testify today, but this guy you see here did. Keith Davidson, the key witness, former attorney for the women you see on the right of that screen, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who negotiated 6-figure payments for both of them over their allegations of affairs with Donald Trump. Allegations he denies. Now, both sides, the prosecution and the defense, they wanted to paint some very different pictures here of Michael Cohen. Prosecutors wanted to show him as a guy who would do anything for Mr. Trump. Look at this. Davidson talking about the lengths Cohen would go to slam Daniels, threatening to rain legal hell down upon her, saying you don't know who you're effing with, trying to deny her story, Davidson says, to protect his client. The defense instead painting Cohen as somebody who was out to get Donald Trump, who had this personal vendetta. And in just the last hour, we heard something very notable from the former president. He seemed to backtrack on testifying after saying initially that he wanted to. Well, I want you to listen to this.
Well, I'm not allowed to testify. I'm under a gag order, I guess, right? I can't even testify on that. No, we're going to be appealing the gag order. I'd love to answer that question. It's a very easy question, the easiest question so far. But I'm not allowed to testify.
Okay, Laura Jarrett is outside that courthouse in Manhattan. So, Laura, listen, you saw the former president kind of looking back at his attorney there over his shoulder. Correct us if I'm wrong here. He can testify if he wants to. That has nothing to do with that partial gag order he faces, right?
Absolutely. He can testify. Whether he should, I will leave that up to his legal counsel. I cannot imagine that that's the advice being given the brutal cross-examination that would happen. But, Hallie, really, the gag order is meant to make sure that no witnesses are intimidated. And what we saw today is the defense saying, look, Michael Cohen is out there attacking our client, so he should be able to defend himself. And the judge is saying, wait a minute, forget Michael Cohen. What about the other witnesses that are watching this ongoing and might have their testimony chilled? So that's really where the source of the debate is right now, Hallie.
take us inside the sort of arguments here, because I think people might go, well, wait a second. Why did Lindsay Lohan and Hulk Hogan and Manny Pacquiao and Charlie Sheen come up during, like, the testimony today? And that's because it was all about this interaction between various parties and celebrity gossip here. Explain that piece of it and why Davidson's testimony was important to that regard, why it matters.
So the defense counsel is trying to undermine Davidson's credibility because, of course, Davidson is the one who's at the center of the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. And so the defense strategy today was to do everything they could to muddy him up in front of the jury, make him look seedy, make him look sketchy and shady. And by doing that, they started digging up old past settlement agreements and essentially accusing him of shaking down other celebrities, sort of the assumption being that you shook Donald Trump down just the same way you shook down Charlie Sheen. Now, of course, Davidson contests all of that and pushed back up against it vehemently, but it was sort of this moment where you kind of saw just this sort of seedy underbelly of how all of these past deals and non-disclosure agreements went down. I don't know how much the jury actually took away from it, Hallie. I think it was a long detour, and what the defense did that was most effective was to say, you have never met Donald Trump. You've never talked to Donald Trump. In fact, the first time you've ever been in a room with him was Tuesday. That's the heart of it, right? Because that gets to Donald Trump's knowledge of the alleged scheme. And I was surprised the defense spent so much time at trying to make Davidson look bad instead of getting to the heart of it.
Real quick, Laura, were you in overflow today? Were you in court, both a little bit?
I was in court. I was there with the former president. I saw the jurors dutifully taking notes as they have been in the past. Very attentive, very cued in.
Did you see the former president closing his eyes? Because that has been a thing that's happened, apparently, that he appears to shut his eyes. He's pushing back. You've probably seen it, this post where he says he was just, I think, resting his beautiful blue eyes to, like, listen intently, basically. But he did seem more engaged today.
Let me put it this way. He rests his eyes a lot and for long stretches. And so that has led to all of sort of the speculation about whether or not he's sleeping. But it is true that he was way more engaged today, mostly because his defense attorneys were doing a very heated, fiery cross-examination. And so, of course, he was paying a lot more attention. His lawyers they're using a lot of invectives and raising their voice. So he was definitely awake for that. And the jury was too, Hallie.
Fascinating stuff. Laura Jarrett, we're glad to have you there. We're glad to have you in court, as always. Thank you very much. 4 or 5 more weeks to go. We'll see. Thanks, Laura. Sure. Overseas now, and some developing news there, because Hamas now says it's sending a delegation of leaders to Egypt to push ahead in those ceasefire talks between Israel and some other key world leaders. An Israeli official tells NBC News they think Hamas may respond to this latest truce proposal, a proposal that includes what you see here, the release of at least 33 hostages in exchange for a 40-day pause in the fighting. If Hamas agrees, obviously, this would be incredibly significant. The last time we saw any kind of ceasefire was about 5 months ago now. But here's what's kind of complicated. It is already, right now, well after midnight in the Middle East, and no official response from Hamas just yet, meaning still a very big and a very real question mark on a deal. Let's bring in Matt Bradley for a gut check. What is it? Where do things stand?
Yeah, Hallie, I mean, you mentioned the timing. It was still looking unlikely even before that, because we heard from a Hamas leader in Beirut today that the group has a, quote, negative attitude toward the draft they've been presented. And the fact is, this has been at an impasse for the past several months. It's always been like this. And the Biden administration, even though they're billing this latest proposal, which the Israelis actually helped to draft, as a very generous offer toward Hamas, and said that the group and its demands remain the only obstacle in the way to peace. This is a two-phase plan, the one that the Israelis just came up with. The first would see 20 to 30 hostages released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, and what could be the longest period of calm yet in Gaza since the crisis began, up to 40 days. And all this is according to the Wall Street Journal. The first phase could then be extended kind of at an ad hoc basis, with periods of peace, exchange for hostages and Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. The second phase, and this could be big, could amount to a 6-week-long ceasefire during which more hostages and Palestinian prisoners would be released. And crucially, the sides could discuss extending the ceasefire even more. But this is hardly the first time we've been through this, Hallie, and the fundamental disagreement that has dogged every round of negotiations is still there. The Israelis keep offering temporary ceasefires, while Hamas has hewed to their one demand for a permanent ceasefire. And that has made it almost impossible. Both sides are not budging. But there is one really crucial difference here. I know this sounds like history repeating. This time around, these talks do look like the last best hope to stop Israel from invading Rafah, that city on the Gaza border, where Israel, right with Egypt in the southern part, where there's supposedly thought to be 1.5 million Palestinians who are thought to have taken refuge. Now, Israel has said week after week that they are determined to invade Rafah, even though the United States, the UN, and other countries throughout the world, they've warned that an invasion of Rafah could create a humanitarian catastrophe. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us there overseas with the latest on that. Much more to watch, Matt. Thank you. Back here at home, Google coming to its own defense today in some pretty historic closing arguments in what's being called the first tech monopoly trial of the modern internet era. How about that for a headline? The DOJ and something like 35 state attorneys general say Google paid companies billions of dollars. Why? Well, to be the default search engine on your phone, on your browsers, breaking federal antitrust laws to dominate the market and make more money. Now, Google says, wait a sec, that's not really the case. They say, hey, customers turn to us because we're the best there is. Eamon Javers has more.
That's right, Hallie. It's 2 days of closing arguments here in Washington, D.C. for the DOJ trial involving Google. And this question of antitrust, as you say, comes down to the issue of whether or not the tens of billions of dollars that Google pays to platforms like Apple to be the default search engine there, whether or not that's anti-competitive behavior or, as Google suggests, that's just good business practice. So this was a 10-week trial. Now we've got 2 days of final arguments. We expect a final decision here, not until sometime in the summer, but everyone's watching Judge Amit Mehta here. He's the guy who's going to make that decision. He's been asking very skeptical questions of both sides. I've actually written down a couple of the questions because he came right out of the gate this morning asking some tough questions of the U.S. government side, saying that search today looks a lot different than it did years ago. Isn't that because Google's been innovating? His suggestion there is that Google is doing all the things that the government suggests it's not doing. It's investing. It's making a better product. It's improving quality. The government says it's a monopoly power and so therefore doesn't have to do all those things. But Meta has also had some tough questions for the Google side as well, asking the Google side at one point why there hasn't been really any effective competition at all for these multi-billion-dollar contracts with Apple and others, saying there hasn't really been any competition for that in 10 to 15 years. If it's such a competitive landscape as Google suggests that it is, well, then you'd think there'd be some actual competitors showing up to try to get some of those big lucrative contracts. So a lot at stake here, Hallie. We'll see what the judge says throughout the day on Friday to see if we can get any more indication of where this is going. But all the participants I've talked to have said that it's really unclear now which way the judge will decide. A whole lot at stake for the tech industry. Back over to you.
Our thanks to Eamon Javers for that reporting. Some other new reporting tonight, just released from NBC News, looks at young independent voters in this year's election. Because, yes, we are just about 6 months away from November. And, yes, the youth vote could make a difference. You're looking at folks from the University of Wisconsin. These are students speaking with our focus group. We call it the Deciders. Because, hey, that's what we all are this election. And what's interesting, this group says that the Israel-Hamas war is a top issue for them. That probably doesn't surprise you. We've been reporting on these pro-Palestinian encampments on college campuses literally across the country. 52 campuses, look at this, 24 states, plus D.C. But the participants in our focus group say even though that's so important to them, it's probably not going to affect their vote for president this fall. If you're curious about that, why that is, listen to the explanation.
I don't think Biden is doing a great job. I don't think Trump would do a better job. As it stands, I can't see it changing how I vote.
Yamiche Alcindor is joining us now. She was part of that focus group there. And students say that the Israel-Hamas war matters to them, that President Biden's handling, or as they see it, largely mishandling of that war matters to them. Tell us more about that piece of it, about what they said about protest and the president's handling of that.
So a number of these, I should say, independent voters under the age of 30, they were all college students.
Super interesting.
They don't believe that Joe Biden, President Biden, is handling the Israel-Hamas war right in a way that they consider to be right. They said over and over again that they really believe that there are too many civilians being killed in Gaza, that they really feel passionate about this, that colleges should disinvest in Israel. They also said that they they were supportive of the encampments, though they said they were not part of the encampments because they were worried about being arrested, which tells you a little bit about this group and that they're supportive, but not to the point where they would sort of join the actual movement. But as you said and pointed out, after saying over and over again, this is my top issue, they said it's not going to impact the way that they vote because they don't see former President Trump, who is, of course, the presumptive Republican nominee. They just don't think that he's going to be any better on this issue in their mind. It's actually, in their mind, going to be worse on this issue. So as a result, they're not voting for anybody because of this issue, they said.
So what issues will affect them? We've talked a lot about abortion access. We know that Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs just today is signing a bill into law that would repeal a very controversial 1864 abortion ban, one of the strictest in the country. It makes no exceptions for rape, incest, only for life of the mother. That will ultimately get rolled back at some point, although it might temporarily go into effect because of procedural rules. Democrats think reproductive rights is going to be huge for them come November. Is that what you're getting from these focus groups?
That is what I got from this focus group. They said that abortion was the top issue that they would be voting on. They also said, though, that the TikTok ban is something that's top of mind. So they are pro-abortion rights, anti-TikTok ban. Take a listen.
So let's talk about Trump. If he defends TikTok, but he's against a woman's right to choose, how do you make up your mind how you're voting?
I'd probably go towards the woman's right.
Okay.
I could probably live without TikTok, but not being able to voice what I can and can't do would be an impact on my life.
So there you heard it. These are people who are on social media, young people who are on social media. But when it comes down to it, they do think that abortion rights definitely ranks over TikTok. But at least one of them said that they might think about voting for former President Trump if he got behind a movement to get away from this TikTok ban and to reverse what's going to happen.
These are such fascinating glimpses. This is what, the third or the fourth that you've done?
Yes.
Been a participant in. Fascinating glimpses into what folks think, and I'm glad we're able to shine a light on them here on the show and to have you do it. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it. Later in this show, you may have gotten lucky, but have you ever gotten win the lottery twice kind of lucky? Yeah, we'll tell you. We'll tell you who did. Spoiler, it's her. Plus, echoes of the Vietnam War protests right now on campuses across the country. We'll talk about 1968 and the shadow now of 2024. The chaos on campuses across the country we told you about at the top of this show echoes some of the unrest and division we've seen at universities during so many conflicts. It's not just schools, it's also far from the first time. Political turmoil over a war has drawn big divisions among members of the same party in a key election year. Watch. Clashes between police and protesters on college campuses across the country. Echoes of another time of turmoil, one that helped define an election and reshape politics for decades. 1968, protesters in the streets, encampments on college campuses, demonstrators opposed to the war in Vietnam, a tipping point for civil rights here at home.
This is a moment where you have these building social movements then galvanized by this international conflict in Vietnam and the Cold War.
At Columbia, student protesters occupied Hamilton Hall, in part to push back on what they saw as a segregated expansion by the university into Harlem's black neighborhoods. Police moving in. 56 years later, to the day, police were back Tuesday to clear that same hall. More than 100 arrested.
And now moving off down Balboa Street and the
By the summer of '68,
the Chicago police are now in the aisles here with billy clubs clearing people out.
Thousands of war protesters faced off with police outside the Democratic Convention in Chicago.
Surely is the first time that policemen have ever entered a convention, the floor of a convention.
A year that saw unrest and violence, including 2 political assassinations.
We shall have order in the United States.
Richard Nixon making disorder in the streets and college campuses a centerpiece of his campaign.
America's in trouble today, not because her people have failed, but because her leaders have failed.
Ultimately defeating Democratic Vice President Hubert Humphrey.
Even if the electoral outcome, the immediate one, doesn't match the results of what the social movement wants, we do know that these movements produce enormous political and cultural change and social change in our country, and they have in the past, and I suspect that they will continue to do so in 2024 and beyond.
And as we talk about 2024, another parallel here, interestingly, the DNC, the Democratic Convention, will be in Chicago in just a couple of months. That same city, of course, where there were those protests at the 1968 convention. President Biden will be there. Monica Alba is covering the president. She's posted up near the White House and the president today. Monica, talking about these present-day protests. And you and our team have more reporting on how he and his administration are trying to navigate this moment.
And it's a tricky one, Hallie, and for days they had been weighing whether the president needed to come out and speak more forcefully to really make an on-camera statement to reiterate what the White House has been saying for more than a week and a half now, which is that any protest that's peaceful and lawful is totally okay by them, but anything that veers into the violent or anti-Semitic is completely unacceptable and has no place on college campuses or really anywhere in the country. And that was the message from the president today in these really hastily arranged remarks that only lasted about 4 minutes in length, but were key, we're told, according to people familiar with the matter, in addressing something that they say was unavoidable for the president to stay quiet any longer. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
And after all, it was the Charlottesville protests and anti-Semitism there that motivated then candidate Joe Biden to get into the race in 2020. So he says he has a lot more to say about the rise of anti-Semitism in particular, and he's going to be speaking at a Holocaust memorial ceremony next week. But in the meantime, the White House is trying to navigate this issue because for days they had really said that it was up to university leadership to decide how best to proceed with either calling in local law enforcement to clear out some of those encampments or not. And they wanted to take a little bit more of a hands-off posture. But I'm told by those people who understood why he came out to speak today that it was the president and others who saw those striking images of young people clashing with police in the last couple of days at Columbia and at UCLA that eventually led the president to decide this morning that he did want to come out. He did want to speak very forcefully and very clearly on this. And he also said that he doesn't think that the National Guard should be called in to deal with any of this. And he also told reporters that he doesn't see any of this changing his policy or his handling right now of the Israel-Hamas war. Hallie.
Monica Alba outside the White House. Mom, thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the number of women dying from pregnancy-related issues has now fallen back to what it was before the pandemic, according to these new CDC numbers. 700 women, just about, who died from maternal causes, as they describe it, last year. In 2021, that number was 1,200, the highest it's been in more than a century. Experts blame COVID complications for that spike. Number 2, Google's laying off hundreds of employees from its so-called core teams, moving some of those roles to India and Mexico. That core unit is responsible for helping to build some of the company's most important products. A Google VP says the changes, in their words, are in service of our broader goals. Number 3, if you've been on TikTok at all today, and I'm guessing you might have been, you probably noticed your favorite music is starting to trickle back in. We're talking about Drake, Ariana Grande, Billie Eilish. That's because TikTok and UMG, Universal Music Group, have now come to a deal that ends this pretty messy months-long fight between these two companies over things like how much artists should be paid and new regulations on AI. Number 4, here in Washington, RFK Stadium, guess what? Cleared for demolition, according to the National Park Service. It hasn't been used for like games in years. It needs major repairs. It was supposed to be torn down at the end of last year, but they had to do kind of an environmental review first. The Washington Commanders have said they would like to use the site for their new stadium. We'll see if that actually happens. Number 5, a woman from Massachusetts hit the jackpot. And then she hit the jackpot again in the span of just 3 months, each time winning $1 million in the Massachusetts State Lottery. Christine Wilson, you got a hot hand, girl. Keep it going. Much more to come tonight here on the show, including overseas, this desperate search for 2 Australian surfer brothers who went missing during a trip to Baja California. We're learning 3 people have now been arrested in connection with that disappearance. You see Jake and Callum Robinson here. Their family members say they haven't been able to get in touch with either of them since Saturday. Callum was posting a bunch of updates on social media for the first couple days of the trip, and then suddenly those updates stopped. One local news outlet reports one of the people arrested had a phone that belongs to either one of the brothers or the friend who was with them. This woman also allegedly had some sort of methamphetamine with her. We still don't know who she is or how she may be connected to the brothers. Miley Hogan from our partners at 7 News Australia is joining us now from Ensenada, Mexico. Miley, we're good to have you. This is glad to have you, I should say. Huge search for these two guys and for the friend they'd been traveling with. Bring us up to speed. Where do things stand?
Well, Hallie, this investigation has really taken a significant step forward, with authorities revealing that 3 Mexicans are now in custody. That woman, the 25-year-old, was arrested yesterday. She is the one that was found with her phone in a possession that is believed to belong to one of the 3 missing men. Overnight, authorities took those other 2 men into custody. Right now, they are questioning all 3 of them, hoping that they may provide some information as to the whereabouts of the 2 Australian brothers and their American friend. We know that this search is really focused on a remote coastal area south of Ensenada. Locals there tell us that it's an area that is popular with fishermen, but that you really have to know where you're going if you're heading out there to camp and surf. And it is believed that that is where these 3 men were camping. Now, they hadn't made contact with their families since Saturday. The mother of the Australian brothers issuing that desperate plea on Facebook to see if anyone had seen her sons. We know that she is now trying to get here to Mexico to search for her boys and hopefully bring them home. Hallie?
Miley Hogan, thank you very much for that reporting. More to watch on that front. Right now, millions of folks in Texas and Louisiana are under flood watches with a ton of rain lashing that area. Something like 100,000 homes do not have power. People in parts of eastern Texas now have to evacuate. You've got crews sending out rescue boats to try to get people out. You've got power lines, cars. Look at this. Parts of homes pretty much submerged, at least partially. One Houston airport putting in place a ground delay because of the bad weather. And now look at this. Streets and highways in and around Houston, pretty unrecognizable. One sheriff's office reporting an emergency rescue for a car stranded in the middle of a couple feet of water. They're telling people, get off the road. Do not get out there and try to drive. City leaders say you should be bracing for more, too. More heavy rain, more flooding, all of it, as we're just now seeing reports of a tornado possibly touching down in rural Missouri in just the last hour. It is now day 7 of tornadoes slamming the heartland. We're going to keep watching all of these developments and keep you posted as we get any news out of that. Still to come here on the show, a fiery crash shutting down one of the most important interstates in America. The rush to reopen 95 in just a minute. Plus, forget the vet. This orangutan took matters into its own hands. A first in primate medicine. Coming up. We're just learning tonight that some pretty bad damage is going to shut down parts of I-95 in Connecticut for what officials say is a quote-unquote extended period after, look at this, huge crash happened earlier this morning. A fuel truck bursting into flames after crashing into 2 other cars, backing up traffic for miles. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Today, a fiery crash shutting down both sides of I-95 through a part of Connecticut for what officials say could be an extended period. Dude. A tractor trailer, a fuel truck, and a car colliding early in the morning. That fuel truck, loaded with thousands of gallons of gas, burst into flames under an overpass. You can see firefighters there trying to put out the fire. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont saying no one was seriously hurt, but that the bridge above the highway is damaged and unsafe and needs to be torn down.
I know what an incredible inconvenience this is for people, and all I can ask you to do is stay away from that area as best you can.
The governor filing an emergency declaration requesting federal funds to rebuild. The incident backing up traffic for dozens of miles, leaving drivers frustrated and stuck.
Stop, start. Could we having to reroute?
I-95 is the main north-to-south highway that runs along the East Coast and is one of the most dangerous interstates in the country, with 278 deadly crashes in 2022. Hundreds of thousands of vehicles drive across stretches of that highway every day, including trucks. So when something goes wrong, the problems can snowball.
Oh, my God.
Case in point, last April, when a fuel tanker rolled over on a bridge in Groton, Connecticut, killing the driver, spilling fuel into the river below and shutting down I-95 for hours. Then, 2 months later, that massive bridge collapse in North Philly, a tractor trailer flipping on an off-ramp and catching fire, causing an overpass to collapse. The driver died, and the section of the highway was shut down for 12 days until a temporary fix was ready. This major artery crucial to keeping the East Coast moving.
Maggie is joining us live. So crucial that cruise officials will do almost anything they can to get it back open ASAP. So how S is the P? In other words, how soon will it be open?
Yeah, it's really good to break apart that acronym. They're working as fast as they can, and they tell us, actually, both lanes of traffic, believe it or not, despite that video, will be back open, they believe, as early as Monday morning. In the meantime, they're going to zero in on that bridge. And you saw in that video, no surprise, it's really badly damaged. They say it has to come down. So demolition of that bridge that goes over the highway, Hallie, is set to begin at 3 a.m. So basically overnight in less than 12 hours. So we'll see how fast this goes.
Lots to watch. Maggie Vespa, thank you. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Brazil, local officials say at least 13 people have died because of a lot of rain in the south of that country. The storms have left more than 20 missing. Thousands of people are out of their homes tonight. The government's now declaring a state of public calamity, as they call it, to try to handle this. Out of France, Paris designating a huge water storage bin to help clean up the Seine River, which, as we've been talking about, that's the venue for the swimming legs of this year's Summer Olympics. That's after canceling some practices last year over the bad river quality. Organizers say the reservoir will take rainwater and treat it before circling it back through the river. They're going to test the water every day of the Olympics to make sure that it's safe. And out of Indonesia, researchers say this orangutan treated its own injuries with a medicinal plant. Scientists watched him. He had a big gash on his face. They watched him chew up leaves and then rub those juices on its cheek. This is not a normal food for orangutans, but humans know this leaf as kind of a pain reliever. It's the first time scientists have ever seen a wild animal apply medicine directly to a wound. You see the before and after? That's the after. You saw the before with the cut. I mean, you barely even noticed the injury. Just incredible. To China now, where officials are giving an update on a deadly highway collapse that killed dozens of people overnight, saying they're trying to identify 3 people. They're concerned that the death toll could go even higher. So much rain caused this piece of road to crumble near the city of Meizhou in southeastern China. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer is in the south of China with more.
Hallie, for a second day, rescuers are digging for survivors after a section of highway collapsed and cars tumbled down the side of a mountain. The death toll has climbed to 48, and officials expect it to edge even higher. It happened around 2 a.m. on Wednesday, the first day of a 5-day national holiday here when a lot of families are traveling. State media say at least 30 people have been injured, some of them seriously. It's a terrible scene, according to officials in the city of Meizhou in Guangdong province, where one side of this 4-lane highway gave way after a month of heavy rains. More than 24 cars plummeted, some of them catching fire. And the rescue efforts now being hampered by bad weather and conditions there. This is a narrow stretch, and officials say that gravel and earth keep sliding down the hill. There are several cars that are still buried, and it's difficult to get heavy equipment in to help because roughly 2,000 feet of the highway has simply disintegrated. And they're worried about secondary disasters because there has been so much rain there, at least 22 inches in the last 4 weeks. That's 4 times more than the area is used to getting. It's part of this pattern of severe weather that's been hitting southern China, causing flooding, high-level warnings, and last weekend, even a rare tornado. There are now more than 500 rescuers who are at the scene of this collapsed highway. One witness told state media that he heard a loud bang and then struggled to control his car as he looked behind and saw vehicles simply disappear with the road beneath them. Hallie?
Our thanks to Janice for that reporting. Still ahead, much more to get to here on the show, including Peloton trying to keep those wheels spinning after losing their CEO and laying off hundreds of employees inside their troubled turnaround. Next. Let's talk about that shakeup today at Peloton with its CEO stepping down ASAP and the company laying off about 15% of its staff. That's like 400 people. That is a massive blow to Peloton and a big turnaround for the company that used to be super pandemic popular. Remember that? It was like everywhere as folks were stuck at home, trying to like keep up their heart rate, keep up their fitness, etc. CNBC's Gabrielle Fonrouge is here to break it down for us. You know, if you look at Peloton's stock price, it is now down lower than it was before the pandemic. They couldn't seem to sustain the popularity at its peak. What happened?
So, Hallie, a lot of things have happened. You know, first of all, Peloton has tried a lot of things to turn things around. It's partnered with big brands like Lululemon, started offering a bike rental program, partnered with corporations like Hyatt Hotels and Hilton. But probably the most important thing that it did was a rebrand. You know, we all know that when Peloton started out, it was reserved for a certain type of person at a certain type of income level. And obviously that limits the number of people that you can make money off of and sell to your customers. So they started to rebrand and started to focus more on the app. They opened up a tiered pricing strategy for their app, which started with free, $12.99, $24. That allowed them to reach all sorts of people who may not have $6,000 to shell out for a treadmill. But the reason why things have went wrong is a confluence of events. It's a little bit of the macro and it's a little bit of the micro. On the macro sense, consumers right now are pulling back on spending from all consumer segments. People just don't have the money to shell out thousands of dollars for exercise equipment. And also, there's a limited number of people who would buy exercise equipment for their homes. It's only reserved for a certain type of person. And then also on the micro level, their balance sheet. Peloton has a broken balance sheet. It has about $1.5 billion in debt. It hasn't turned a profit since December of 2020. And Wall Street can see the writing on the wall. If you can't turn things around, if you can't grow sales, if you can't generate cash, there's only so much time you can keep going like this. Hallie?
What if you already have a Peloton and you're paying that $40 or whatever a month fee to keep it?
I mean, that's a great question. If you have a Peloton, it's obviously still going to work. The company isn't going anywhere. And Peloton users right now, they should rest assured that this company isn't going anywhere, at least not yet. The restructuring that they announced today is expected to save the company $200 million and then by fiscal 2025. And so with those savings, the company doesn't need to return to growth in order to generate free cash flow, which is what they need to kind of keep the business alive. That's what executives said today. But it's unclear whether or not this company can continue to be public. When you have Wall Street watching you like this, when you have these demands that you need to meet every single quarter, these expectations, you know, it's unclear. You know, it might make sense for a private equity firm or some other type of firm like that to buy the company out, kind of shield it from the public, be able to generate it some cash flow, but it's not going to be able to do that until it fixes its balance sheet.
Gabrielle Fonrouge, thank you very much. Super interesting. Appreciate it. Still to come, we are hearing from Britney Spears for the first time since some new photos created new concern over how she's doing. We'll tell you what she's saying about a late-night visit from medics. Tonight, some new concerns about how Britney Spears is doing after this dramatic scene outside that iconic Chateau Marmont Hotel in Hollywood. Spears herself, in just the last 30 minutes, putting out a new statement saying medics showed up at her hotel room door, she says illegally. The LA Fire Department says they responded right after midnight California time overnight to reports of an adult woman who was hurt. They didn't say what happened or how, but photographers caught this moment, the one that you see right here, showing Spears standing outside the hotel, wrapped in just a blanket, holding a pillow, at least that's what it looks like, with a lot of fans raising concerns about this scene because it's giving them a little bit of deja vu, with some suggesting it's echoing some of what we saw back in 2007, when it was reported that Spears had been struggling with her mental health. Reps for Spears did not return our request for comment, but obviously, Chloe Malash joining us now. Obviously, Chloe, we have that Insta post from Britney, right? Talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, Hallie, this is what we know. Two sources close to Britney Spears telling us that there was an incident at the Chateau Marmont.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.